Bonjour à tous. Juste vous préciser que la présentation elle va se passer en français, mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans la langue de... en anglais, excusez-moi. Mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans la langue de votre choix. So, hello everyone. My name is Ismail EL ABELLAOUI. I'm a cybersecurity consultant working at CGI with the OT team. So I work with Jad, who unfortunately was not able to make it today due to personal reasons. And we work with both operational technologies and emerging technologies like the Internet of Things. And I stand here today before you to address the current subject, which is Cryptocalypse, safeguarding critical infrastructures against ransomware attacks. So in our ever-growing tech-driven world, we are provided, due to technology, unprecedented capabilities. However, with such capabilities also comes a fair load of a new phase of culminating threats. Therefore, I stand here before you throughout this presentation to explore the ins and outs of what we have defined as the Cryptocalypse. So to first conceptualize the subject of Cryptocalypse, I want to first define the phonetic roots of the term. So it's a merge of both cryptography and apocalypse. And when we think about, for the last century, so the 1900s, some of the most apocalyptic events that we've seen, as we can see on the screen, we have the two world wars, the Spanish flu pandemic that victimized a third of the whole population, 10% of everyone it victimized. We have, for example, also the Cold War. And when we think also about cryptography, it's also fair to mention that during the 1900s, it also had an impact on changing the course of history. And since I've just mentioned the World War, it's fair to mention that, for example, Alan Turing decoded the Enigma machine, giving the Allied forces the winning advantage they needed to win the Second World War. Or that also, since I've mentioned the Cold War, we know that both the Soviet Union and the United States have used encryption-based authentication for their arsenal of nuclear weapons. However, in the current world that we live in, so the current century, cyber threat and cybercrime are some of the fastest growing threats to public safety. And since we know that ransomware attacks are the most prominent cyber threat, Cryptocalypse is the name that we have defined for the phenomenon of ransomware attacks on critical infrastructures and their potential apocalyptic impacts. So I just want to go through the Cryptocalypse, a bit of context on the Cryptocalypse in Canada. So when we look at some of the headlines around the current geopolitical landscape, we can see that, and more specifically around the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, we can see that critical infrastructure being targeted by Russian hackers. For example, Canada's Cyber Intelligence Agency warned potential attacks during Zelensky's visits. And more specifically, Russia-aligned hackers are looking to disrupt Canada's energy sector. So this threat of cyber warfare, as we've seen, is particularly relevant in the energy sector. And I just want to point your attention on this picture. So this is a picture that I took from a video that was published by RT, which is a Russian newspaper. You can call it a propaganda video. And it's describing the merry anti-Russian Christmas as an apocalyptic Christmas where Western countries do not have access to decent energy. And it also comes in pair with the energy blockade that Russia has brought on the Western countries due to their high supply in natural gas. So that's kind of the current Cryptocalypse in terms of critical infrastructure against through the geopolitical context. And on the right, you can see a report by Malwarebytes, which is under threat intelligence team, which says clearly during the month of September 2023, so last month, that Canada was the third most impacted country by ransomware attacks. But however, I just want to go through now what exactly is defined as a critical infrastructure and just how prominent are ransomware attacks on this critical infrastructure. Obviously, this report just says that Canada is the third most impacted by ransomware, but it doesn't imply that all ransomware attacks or most ransomware attacks are against a critical infrastructure in Canada. So let's just dive straight into it. So a critical infrastructure would be any asset that has a function that is essential to the functioning of society. So naturally, that implies, well, hospitals, power grids, communication, water facilities, food and agriculture. As a matter of fact, you can see the 10 sectors that are categorized in Canada officially by the government as a critical infrastructure. And when we take a look at the same report by Malwarebytes threat intelligence team, again for the month of September 2023, we can see that the industry sectors that were targeted by ransomware attacks last month, most of them may include a company that is categorized as a critical infrastructure. So we can see service, manufacturing, healthcare, government, food. And another thing that I want to point your attention to is the healthcare, which is technically the fifth, but considering first is service and manufacturing, you can basically call it third. It is known to be one of the most impacted by ransomware attacks. And one may wonder just why is it so impacted by ransomwares. So let's take a look at our use case of the medical industry. So in order to define why is it so victimized by attacks, I want to first define why is it so digitalized, because obviously if an industry is more digital and more further connected, it's going to be more prone to cyber attacks and cyber threats. So a lot of new attributes have brought the digitalization of the medical industry. So first we have enhanced care, and that consists in the integration of digital technologies to improve the delivery of healthcare. A good example for that would be during the COVID-19. We saw the start of telemedicine. Obviously, since during the COVID-19, hospitals were not only overbooked, but also were at risk to contract the virus. A lot of people have used telemedicine to get healthcare services. Next is research development, and that would imply the use of technical infrastructure for the study and the development of medical solutions. Mayo Clinic, which is one of the biggest, the best-ranked hospitals in the world, has a center that does that very well, and they've actually had the ability to study and develop the genomics and develop medical solutions thanks to their collaboration with both IBM and Google for cloud computing. Next is the Internet of Things, so the use of connected devices for usually inpatient and for remote monitoring of both vital signs and health status. Next is data-driven decisions, so using data analytics to study potential outcomes of patients. And last but not least is communication. Just like in every industry, it's the integration of communication tools in the industry. And in the case of hospitals, it's mainly seen around the EHR, which is the electronic health records. And it allows for real-time alerts and for updates. So now that we know that the medical industry is further digitalized, we know that obviously that brings more cyber threats. And I just want to take a look at a summary of the cyber attacks on the medical industry. And this summary is based on the 2023 Data Breach Investigation Report and the 2022 IRIS-CNTR report. So as we can see, summary, highly targeted by ransomware gangs. This is something that we've seen ever since COVID. The healthcare industry is highly targeted by the ransomware gangs. And also the motives, we can see 98% financial driven. This is something we see since we know that ransomware are financial driven. Actually, financial driven are either ransomwares or crypto mining. And I also want to get your attention on the picture on the right. This is the hospital for the sick children. It's a hospital in Toronto that was earlier this year targeted by Lockbit, which is the infamous ransomware group, one of the biggest ransomware groups in the world. And what I find very interesting about this specific use case and this specific attack on this hospital, and also the reason why I chose it, is that Lockbit ended up giving the decryption key for free and even apologized for targeting this hospital. So basically, they have a chart that says that you're not allowed to attack hospitals. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't actually Lockbit that targeted this hospitals. It was one of its subsidiaries, and I'm guessing someone in the chain of command of Lockbit ended up retracting from actually attacking the hospital out of common empathy. It is a children's hospital after all. I just found it really interesting to see that even in cyber warfare and in crime in general, there's a certain sense of integrity to potential impacts. And since we know also, even though, like I mentioned, ransomwares are very financial driven, there always are collateral damage and impacts that are not directly related to the monetary aspect, and that criminals are not planning, at least in the case of ransomwares, in the case of cyber criminals. And I wanted to go through some of these potential impacts, at least on the medical industry. So this is the results of a study that was conducted by the Eponemon Institute. They've actually conducted a survey around 600 health IT practitioners in the United States. And what they got out of this specific survey is that there was 66% of hospitals that were targeted in the United States. Out of this 66%, 24 healthcare organizations actually fell victim to a successful ransomware. Fortunately, 36% of them reported a serious increase in medical complications, and 22 actually believed that there was death involved. And I'm saying believe because obviously you can't actually claim that a certain person died because of the ransomware. All of the people who are in hospital and end up dying due to an IT outage or a loss of efficiency that is caused by a ransomware already are people who had medical complications. So this is I defined as the spark in the wildfire that Cryptocalypse is. It's seeing that people are having impacts that are more important than just the case of monetary aspect, that people are dying in the case of the medical industry and in the case of critical infrastructures in general. So let's talk about the actual Cryptocalypse. Let's talk about what the potential impact could be if, let's say, cyber criminals such as hackers had the ability to conduct a series and a chain of ransomwares around hospitals around the world. So these are some of the, we're not seeing the whole slide, but that's okay. These are some of the potential apocalyptic impact. So first things first, mass casualties. Obviously, people would die, and according to the health service research, hospital IT-based outages have led to in 30 days mortalities. And obviously that also includes IT-based outages that are caused by cyber attacks. Next is pandemics amplification. This is something that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic due to the fact that the hospitals were more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Healthcare organization increased 45%, attacks against healthcare organization increased it by 45% during the COVID-19. Next is global health crisis. Obviously, if we don't have the ability to provide reasonable care, we would face a global health crisis, since we know that the average life cycle to a data breach in a hospital is 329 days, according to the Eponemon Institute. And last but not least, new age for bioterrorism. So this is related to an aspect of the healthcare industry that is not to be minimized, which is the life science. So we know that there are dozens of connected high containment laboratories in Canada, and there are between 200 and 300 in the United States. These are laboratories that have a biosafety level of either 3 or 4. So that implies highly critical laboratories. So that would give cyber criminals a chance and an instant pattern toward a new age for bioterrorism. So as we've seen what the Cryptocalypse could potentially look like, obviously the question now is what must be implemented and what exactly should security practitioners implement in order to safeguard critical infrastructure from ransomware attacks. So these are some of the baseline of a decent cybersecurity practice. Obviously, there are more there are more initiatives that are to be taken, but these are consist in a pretty decent baseline. So first of all, incident response and continuity. So having the ability not only to contain cyber incidents, but also to appropriately recover from cyber incidents. And that implies, first of all, having an incident response plan and having a team that is trained for that specific incident response plan through either simulation or real exercises. Also having a resilient-based backup process and having also an IT recovery plan. And also basing your recovery and its priority on a business impact analysis and a business continuity analysis, and using KPIs from that business continuity analysis, such as RTOs and RPOs, for the incident response and specifically the continuity. Next is GRC awareness, GRC, which stands for governance, risk, and conformity, and awareness and training. So supporting your security posture with the risk-driven decisions and to adequately educate your stakeholders. One thing that is always said in cybersecurity is that the human is the weak link in a cybersecurity and in a cyber attack. So having the ability to adequately educate your stakeholder is also key. Next is zero trust architecture. So having a secure standard network that is segmented and that is backed with secure communication protocols, and also that is backed with a robust identity and access management that is based on the industry standards. Physical security, something that is particularly relevant in the case of operational technologies and obviously critical infrastructures, having the ability to protect your physical assets with physical access management, with infrastructure and perimeter security, and with a solid physical security governance. And last but not least, network monitoring. So continuously monitor your network for irregularities and detecting anomalies from the surveillance. So a few takeaways from the presentation. So as I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation, cryptography has affected history, both in a good way and now in a bad way due to ransomware attacks. So the cryptography is a double-edged sword. Next, critical infrastructures are highly targeted. We've seen that through the use case of the medical industry, but in general, all critical infrastructures are infrastructures that are highly targeted by ransomware attacks. Third, even though we know that ransomware attacks, as I've mentioned, are usually financially driven, there are always impacts, collateral impacts that are life-threatening, as we've seen for the case of the healthcare industry. And last but not least, security initiatives must be strengthened and implemented in order to safeguard your critical infrastructures. So that sums up my presentation. If anyone would have a question, comments, or a discussion that they would like to share on the subject, please reach to the microphone in the front, and I'll be waiting for